In this video, we're going to look at the creation of a new story, a new non-linear story in Twine. So I've entered Twine's story dashboard, and you can see all of the stories that I've currently got saved in my dashboard, and the data for these is saved in this particular browser on my computer. So if I want to make a permanent record of these, I need to download them as a file, which I'll show you a little later. And of course, if I've got one that I've already downloaded as a file and I want to continue working on it, I can use the import from file option. But for now, let's create a new story and show how to link the different passages together. So on the right hand side here, I click on plus story and I give my story a name. Let's make it a haunted house story. And the first thing I see now is the story map area, and I see my first untitled passage. And as I build this story out, you're going to see multiple passages with links between them that represent the pathways that a reader can take. So if I double click on this untitled passage, and if I select the title here and give it a name, and remember that this is the name not only of the passage, but this is also the name of the link that will lead to this passage. So the one place where I'll link to this passage will be on the final passage of each of my story threads. I'd probably call it something like introduction, or start, or into the haunted house, or something of that nature. So I give it a name. I then type in the text that will appear for the viewer. And any text that I put inside double square brackets is going to be a link, and also by creating that link I'll create the passage that it links to, unless of course that passage already exists. So again, when I choose what text to put down as a link, it's also going to be the title of that passage. So it makes sense to give it something fairly brief, but something that describes the passage that it's going to and the action that the reader wants to take, or wants the characters to take. So as you can see, I created two links that automatically created the two passages that the reader can link to. So let's choose the run away and go home option, and we'll add some more narrative. And in this case, I'm going to add what we could refer to as a closed loop, or a cul-de-sac. That is, in this case, the reader has chosen an option, but we're actually only going to give them one more option, and that is to go back where they came from. So to do that, I simply add the link back to the previous slide, or to a slide that's going to be part of this loop. And you can see that as soon as I start to type the link text, it actually comes up with any of the existing passages that might apply. So in this case, it's introduction. So if I just double click on introduction there, it'll automatically add that link in. And that's really useful for making sure that I don't accidentally add an extra passage there. I do actually link back to the existing passage. And you can see that in this case, the arrow goes in both directions. So if the reader chooses to run away and go home, they'll be given a single link, and that is to go back to the introduction. So let's just test that. So if I select the introduction passage and hit the play button, you can see I'm given the text, including the spelling mistake that I made earlier, which I'll have to fix up in a moment. And if I choose run away and go home, it takes me off to that passage to the side, and then directs me back to where I came from. So that's a cul-de-sac. You've actually restricted the reader and said, no, you can't really go any further in that direction. Back you go. And now, of course, if they keep selecting that, they'll just keep getting put into that loop. But if they choose go inside, they'll go to the next passage, the one entitled Go Inside. You can see that the preview is opened up in a new tab. So let's go back to the tab that contains our story map. And I can just keep adding more text. I could just call this one climb, but I'm actually going to say climb the stairway, because there might be somewhere else in my story where I want my reader or a character to do some climbing. So if I just call it climb, it won't be clear which of the two climbs relates to which part of the story or which story thread. And you can see again, as I add links, it's adding more passages. And sometimes you'll actually restrict the movement of the player so that you give them some consequence for their choices, but you prevent them from sort of ending the story. You put them back on the path. So that's another reason for, get rid of that spelling mistake, that's another reason you might choose to use a looped pathway. And again, you can see that the existing passages come up so that I can choose them. And you can see this is another example of a loop. This one is a straight back and forth. This one goes through a secondary passage. So I can branch out for multiple pathways, and I can end the story. And let's say I have actually ended the story. And I want the player to have the option to go back to the start. I can provide an instruction, but link back to the first slide. And because I want this instruction to appear different to the rest of the text, I'm going to make it appear as italic. So to make text appear italic, I just put 2 double forward slashes on either side of my text. And you can see now that I have a few different parts. It's a very simple story, this one obviously, but if I built a full one over a longer period, it would have a lot more passages and more branches. So again, I can test my story by pressing play, and I can follow the link all the way through to the end of, in this case I've only got one passage that I can follow, or one pathway I can follow, but to the end of whichever pathway as the reader I've chosen, and then go back to the beginning. So that's how to create a very simple non-linear story. Just fix up that spelling mistake there. And you can see that I've now got that in the form of a story map, and I can check to make sure that there are no dead ends that don't link back or that don't resolve out into a completed pathway. Once I've finished, if I want to save that, obviously it's automatically saved in my browser. There it is there on my story dashboard. It's saved for this browser. In the next video I'll show you how to download that as a file and upload it if you have to be using a different browser or on a different computer.